Hello friends, Frogopolis here, and welcome to my Froggy Favorites of 2024. A lot of really good stuff came out this year, and I saw a lot of stuff. Using my incredible movie brain, I have picked best movies of 2024, and I will be doing them in, get this, a list from 10 to 1, and then honorable mentions. So without further ado, let's start with number 10. I saw that TV Glow was able to capture what it was like growing up in the 90s as a closeted, queer, trans kid a little too well, as in it scared the crap out of me. Even if you're neither of those, I feel the movie is able to resonate with a broad audience. It has this very dreamlike atmosphere that works really well when it suddenly pushes you into a nightmare. With its moody soundtrack and its cinematography that really helps you feel just how alone these main characters are. Speaking of which, Justice Smith and Brigitte Lundy Payne are fantastic as the leads. My only real complaint is that the movie really likes to take its time, and while that's not necessarily a bad thing, you really feel it at parts. Despite that, I think there is something very special here and I highly recommend it. Number 9 is In a Violent Nature. This was the prettiest and most relaxing horror movie I've seen all year. While watching a guy walk through the woods isn't the most exciting thing for everybody, I found when something finally happened, it was very effective. There's this never-ending feeling of dread, as the killer slowly yet methodically does his business without much of a second thought, with much brutality. Especially one of the kills, which was so excessive and lengthy that I just couldn't help but scream and laugh. While I like how organically the story is told, it did feel a little clunky at times, and it could use some tweaks here or there, but this was such a refreshing watch that I didn't mind too much, but it is noticeable. Number 8. Furiosa is cool as hell. Much like the excellent Mad Max Fury Road, this expands on the universe and is quite the spectacle to watch. I love how the story is told as a fable, and Furiosa was the perfect character for this. Dr. Dementis is a great antagonist, and he really helps balance the dead seriousness and also absurd humor that we know of this series. There's just so much to observe and chew on here that even at almost 2 hours and 30 minutes, I want to give it another watch. And speaking of spectacle, the action set pieces are once again great. It's all just so thrilling and uses its time very well. While it's not in theaters anymore, this is the kind of movie you want to watch with the best sound system and setup possible. If you can, of course. Either way, I think you're going to have a great time watching this if you haven't yet. Number 7. Speaking of epics that take place in the desert, Dune 2. Part 1 was pretty good, but I wasn't the biggest fan. It just kind of failed to grab me, even though I could certainly see the talent that went into it. Part 2, though, is fascinating. Denis Villeneuve was able to take this incredibly dense material and put it all together, making it accessible to a wider audience while still making you want to learn more. Everyone is putting on their best here. Timothée Chalamet is just fantastic as Paul Atreides, and Zendaya is perfect alongside him as Shawnee. And then of course you have Austin Butler just killing it as Fade Ralpha. And then, much like Furiosa, the visuals and sound are fantastic. This film is an incredible achievement of storytelling and filmmaking. And I am very excited for when Messiah comes out. Number 6. Since I already made a video about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, I probably won't spend too long talking about it. Kingdom is a great continuation of the trilogy that came before it. I am pleasantly surprised of how consistently good this franchise has been. I can't wait to see how they further expand on the universe and where the story goes. Also, this movie has Rocka. I like Rocka. Number 5. Thelma is delightful and my feel-good movie of the year. I love how genuine the characters feel. You've probably met a Thelma at some point in your life. They did a great job making it seem as these characters knew each other their whole lives. That's how good the chemistry is. And I find it did a good job at touching upon what it's like to get older, while also telling a very entertaining story about this lady that's trying to get her money back after being scammed. This is also one of the funniest movies I've seen this year. It's just so clever and well written. With my usual diet of horror and sci-fi and weird artsy films, it was kind of nice watching something so down to earth. And I highly recommend finding this movie, kicking back, and just having a relaxing evening. But you know what's not relaxing but for awesome? Number 4, Love Lies Bleeding. Kristen Stewart and Katie O'Brien are just incredible here, and have fantastic chemistry with each other. This movie celebrates women's wrongs, and I am here for it. I will gladly watch whatever the director Rose Glass makes next if it's as good as this. I say this in the most loving way possible, that this movie is a slow-motion car crash that you cannot look away from. And everything from the build-up to the climax right to when everything explodes is just so well done. I can't recommend this movie enough. If for whatever reason you have not seen this movie yet, go watch it. Watch it right now. Pause the video. I'll wait. I'll just sit here staring into space until you get back. It's fine. Number 3. The Substance is an incredible piece of body horror that will bash you in the head with its message as much as it needs to until it gets across. And while this isn't always a good thing, this movie is such a brilliant satire and goes so goddamn bonkers that it works. Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley are just so good in this. Demi especially is able to give this performance with so much range in it, where she can be so unhinged 1 second, but then just so relatable in the next. As funny and out there as this movie is, it's also very heartbreaking, and it does a good job conveying what it's like to get older with these incredibly unrealistic beauty standards. And oh my god, the practical effects in this movie are incredible. I was losing my goddamn mind at the climax of this film. This is easily one of the best pieces of body horror I've ever seen, and it is up there with The Fly and Slither and just how good it is. I've noticed that this movie is nominated for a lot of awards, especially in visual effects, and I really hope it wins because it deserves it. Now we are at my runner-up for favorite movie of 2024, and this might surprise some people. My second favorite movie of 2024 is the French horror film Mads. It's not just the fact that it was all done in one take that makes this one of my favorite movies of the year, it's the fact that it's so engaging and well acted while doing it. I went into this movie blind when I first saw it. I didn't even know what it was about. I just thought the poster looked cool. And from start to finish, I was completely mesmerized as things started going from bad to worse for our protagonist. How the movie slowly yet surely makes you realize what exactly is going on is just incredible. And in the middle of all of this, they're seamlessly able to give the characters backstory and personality so you're more attached. Even if it wasn't for this movie's very impressive technical feats, it would have still been a very good movie just for the story it told and how well it was done. I am being somewhat vague with the plot, but even if you can glean what it's about from the trailer playing right now, it is still something I think is quite the treat to experience for the first time. The sheer talent and coordination it would have taken to pull this off is something that needs to be praised. There's a good chance you may have already seen this film, but if you're hearing it from me for the first time, yes, please go see this. It is on Shudder. It was really hard making a top 10 list because a lot of great stuff came out this year, let alone picking a number 1. And really, anything in my top 5 probably could have made this spot, but my number 1 choice was particularly special to me. My number 1 favorite movie of 2024 is Longlegs. It's not often that a movie has such a fantastic marketing campaign that actually lives up to the hype once it comes out. But this movie succeeded in that, and then some. is just oozing with mystery and dread. The settings and acting are just so good. The way the movie is able to make you feel like you're being watched at all times, and just never quite feel safe. Everyone is just bringing their A game here, but I really want to take a moment to talk about just how good Alicia Witt and Kiernan Shipka are in their minor but very important roles. They're just so good at making you feel this horrible pit in your stomach when you hear them talk, with these horrifying yet mesmerizing performances. And then of course you have Micah Monroe and Nicolas Cage just also killing it in their respective roles. I haven't felt this scared and unsettled since Hereditary, and what really helps get this feeling across aside from the acting is the fantastic directing and cinematography. It all comes together to make what to me is a perfect movie. Of course, everything in this top 10 list is amazing and I would recommend at any time. And then there's all the other really good movies that came out this year, and here is when I get into my honorable mentions. First off, Oddity. Damien McCarthy is just so good at setup and payoff, along with making compelling stories. The way the story unravels up until its ending is simply brilliant. The opening scene for this movie instantly hooked me, and it was just so smartly written, especially thinking about it in retrospect. And that freaky sculpture is very cool and used very well. While I will say I liked his previous film Caveat more, this is still a great watch, and you should definitely check it out. Next up is Smile 2, which, if anything, is here because Naomi Scott is just acting her heart out. She is just so electric in this role. The movie also looks great, and I love how they pace the horror throughout. Even if some of the story beats and scares are predictable, they're done so well that it doesn't really matter that much. What's really the movie's biggest weakness is that Naomi Scott is the best part of the movie when it comes to characters. Yes, there is Gemma, and she's also pretty good, but the other two characters that come even close die pretty early in the film, so it's hard to get emotionally attached when certain things happen. Speaking of poor characters, now to talk about Alien Romulus. Out of the two leads, I didn't really care much for anyone in this movie. But I'm a simple frog. I wanted a well-made alien movie and I got one. Does it do anything crazy new? Does it reinvent the wheel? No. But I love aliens, and yeah, this movie is a big old stack of memba berries, and I ate them all. Gladly. Though even on its own, this is a very well made and exciting film. While I do think there needed to be some improvements here or there, hopefully the next film, which seems to be being made, does more of its own thing and gives us some better characters. If you're a fan of the franchise and space horror in general, I think you'll have a lot of fun with this one. I also had a lot of fun with this next film, Deadpool and Wolverine. While the humor in the movie is pretty hit or miss, I really liked the characters and think they did a great job bringing back Hugh Jackman. He has great chemistry with Deadpool, and it was just fun watching them do stuff together. I really liked how much of a love letter this is to previous Marvel films, especially the X-Men. And the cameos actually had meaning to them. We meet several superheroes from earlier Marvel movies like Blade, and they have meaning in the film and they contribute to the story. And this is surprisingly heartfelt. There are a lot of scenes that pulled at my little heartstrings. This movie really reminded me why I like comic book films. It's a bit lengthy, and like I said, not everything works, but I had a really good time. Kinds of Kindness is a movie I had a hard time rating because it is Yorgos Lanthimos at his most Yorgos Lanthimos. This is also an anthology film with 3 movies in one, all following the theme of toxic relationships. And when it comes to these kind of movies, there's certain segments I dislike better than other ones. And while all 3 of these are pretty good, it was mostly the last one that I found the most interesting. And certain parts of each story just didn't really work for me, and I was just kind of sitting there waiting for it to be done. But what did work for me really worked for me. And I will gladly watch whatever weird, wonderful thing this man comes up with next. Next up is Terrifier 3, a movie so gleeful in its excess that I kind of admire it. And what helps these movies work so well is David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown. It is ridiculous how much charisma and personality he has while not making a single sound. And for what is such a splatterfest, we actually have a pretty intriguing story with survivor Sienna from the previous film. These movies wouldn't be half as good without her. I'm just going to be completely honest, I'm not even sure if I can recommend this movie to most people just because of how ridiculously violent it is. But considering how incredibly popular these films have gotten, maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe there's more sickos out there than I thought. And of course, talking about a Terrifier film, I have to talk about the very good practical effects, which walk a fine line of being ridiculously cartoonish and horrifyingly realistic. Recommended if this is your kind of thing and you can stomach it. On the completely other end of the horror spectrum, let's talk about Beetlejuice. It's nice to see Tim Burton return back to form and this make a fun little spooky movie. It actually seems like he had fun making it here. This was a lot of fun and I loved the settings and characters. Though I do think they tried to cram too much into the movie and it just ended up feeling kind of bloated. Trim some of the fat here and you have a pretty great film. Another movie that was pretty great is It's What's Inside. Admittingly, I had a hard time getting into this movie in the first half because I'm old. I am of indeterminate age. So when the movie started, and it just has all these early 20-somethings throwing all of this fancy newfangled speak in my face, there was a bit of whiplash. But once everything really started going and you really started to get to know the characters, it's very good. We have all these people that secretly hate each other and they're all swapping bodies of crazy technology. And then when the inciting incident happens, which I won't spoil, you just have to guess who's who's lying, and it's all done really well. The movie's chaotic nature eventually all comes together to make something pretty satisfying, and I'm glad I stuck with it. Next we got Maxine. I really liked X, and I loved Pearl, so how does Maxine measure up to them? Pretty well. Maxine is a very likable character, and she carries most of the film. It certainly has its moments, but it's just not as good as the first two movies before it. The narrative as a whole just didn't do much for me. But I still liked it well enough. A bit disappointing, but hey, if you've watched the other two already, you may as well see this one. Next up is Cuckoo, which was pretty interesting. I really liked Hunter Schafer here, and the weird direction the story went in was a welcome surprise. Much like I Saw the TV Glow, Cuckoo also has this very dreamlike quality to it. It really fits how strange everything is, and I really like it. Really, my biggest disappointment is that they didn't do more of it, but it works for what it is. It's not perfect, but if you want to watch something a little different, I suggest Cuckoo. Speaking of something completely different, Sasquatch Sunset. I am absolutely in awe of this bizarre film, and I don't think I'll ever see anything quite like it ever again. The costumes and makeup here are fantastic, and it's all in service of watching Sasquatches do Sasquatch stuff. Okay, that is a bit reductive. The overall story is about how we treat nature and how nature treats us in return. And we see these Sasquatch surviving through the different seasons. They all have their own personalities and characteristics, and I had a delightful time just watching them do their thing. Of course, I say that with this being also one of the most disgusting films I've seen in a while, which will definitely turn some people off. But to me, it is strange, funny, and surprisingly heartwarming. Damn, look at me just firing through all these reviews. There's a lot of movies to get through. Like Mr. Crockett. Do you like Are You Afraid of the Dark? Do you like Goosebumps? Imagine a feature-length film that feels like an episode of that. And I say this in a very positive way. It perfectly captures the feeling, and you can tell the people who made this were heavily inspired by them. I loved the look and feel of this movie, and it very much made up for its sometimes weak characters and story. And Elvis Nolasco as Mr. Crockett is just so good that he really picks up for everybody else. I had so much fun watching this guy be a supernatural, creepy kid show host. The scenes of him are just so cool and creative. There's stuff in this movie that genuinely surprised me, and I think it'll be a pleasant surprise for you too. Next up is VHS Beyond. Despite their varying quality, I look forward to every time one of these anthology movies come out. And I am happy to say that this is definitely one of the stronger entries in the franchise. I especially liked the opening short, Stork. Much like other VHS movies though, the wraparound segment isn't the strongest here, but it does have a really cool shot at the end. And the dog sitter short was... well, it was there. Next up is another movie I've done a video on with Trap. It is very stupid, but very fun, and Josh Hartnett is wonderfully hammy. But boy, does it overstay its welcome. I recommend this movie if you are okay with turning your brain off for a while. You know what other movie benefits from this? Venom: The Last Dance. I just think Eddie Brock and Venom are delightful, and I am perfectly fine with this movie just being silly shenanigans for the most part. Though this movie suffers from what other comic book movies suffer from, with a pretty weak villain. Which is crazy to say because Null is so big and important in the comics. And while his threat is certainly felt throughout the movie, he takes a backseat to, well, Venom and Eddie doing shenanigans. Now me who loves that and just wants to have a good time, I was cool with that. I was having a great time. Hell, I even liked the scene where they were hanging out with the hippies. It was really sweet. And when Venom danced with Miss Shen, yeah, that was really dumb, but I had a big dumb grin on my face. It's a real shame that there's all this who owns what nonsense between Disney and Sony, because I would have loved to see Eddie and Venom interacting with other Marvel characters. These two really deserved better, but this is fine for what it is. Next up is Abigail, which I thought was a very fun movie, and I had a very good time watching it. Until the last 20 minutes or so, where it veers off into a direction I wasn't super into. This movie has enough charm and great characters though to make up for that. It also helps that it is very funny. Get some friends together and check it out, I'm sure you'll have a good time. I would also love to talk about the first Omen. I haven't seen the other Omen movies, but this one seems to work very well on its own. I knew it was going to be great after its excellent opening scene. It's just so stylish and atmospheric with a lot of genuine scares, and is my pleasant surprise of the year. I really liked this movie, I'll probably watch it again. My last movie to discuss in my honorable mentions is Heretic. I wish I could say I loved this movie. Hugh Grant, Sophie Thatcher, and Chloe East are all great acting opposite of each other. And I really liked this movie's first half. The pacing is very good, it's well shot, and the tension is perfectly made. Not to mention, Hugh Grant as Mr. Reed is so effortlessly menacing but funny and charming that he really catches you off guard at times. Unfortunately, while not terrible by any means, I just wasn't very invested in the second half of this movie. There's still some good stuff in there, but its premise wears thin. For the most part though, I still really liked this movie and I would suggest checking it out. And with that, there are my froggy favorites of 2024. There's a lot of stuff I've heard great things about that I just haven't gotten around to seeing, which is just more proof of how good this year was for movies. And hopefully next year is the same. What were your favorite movies of the year? Is there anything I didn't talk about that I should check out? I'd love to hear about it. Thank you for watching and have a happy new year. I'd also like to thank everybody who has stopped by and checked out my stuff. It's really appreciated. If you liked this stuff, like and subscribe or leave a little comment. Either way, I'm just happy you stopped by. I will see you in the near future. Bye.